Hello again, my fiber friends. I'm ReRe, and this is Exploration Crochet, part of the Yarn Over Hook network. Today, we're doing a mini tour through crochet history. We have spent a lot of time talking about the older facets of crochet, its connection to older traditions, the delicate lace of the Victorians, for example. Now, let's spend a little time on a newer one, Mosaic Crochet. It's one of the most "how is this even possible" looks within modern crochet, built on a surprisingly simple trick: bold, geographic color work while only working one color per row. We'll peek at the people who helped popularize it and realize reasons it went from niche technique to everywhere you look tiles and zigzags. If you spent any time on social media lately, you've seen it. That stunning tile-like fabric that looks like ancient Greek floors or complex Nordic sweaters. At first glance, it seems impossible. You see colors shifting in and out of a pattern and assume there must be a nightmare of tangled yarn behind the scenes. But here's the secret. You're only ever using one color at a time. Today, we're tracing the DNA of this technique from its roots in 1970s knitting to the viral crochet sensations of the 2010s and 2020s. Mosaic crochet is a color work method that creates crisp, geometric patterns by combining simple stitches, usually single crochet, double crochet UK, plus a taller stitch, sometimes referred to as the Mosaic double crochet US, or the Mosaic treble, UK. This is then combined with strategic placement that lets a taller stitch reach down and visually cover stitches below. The headline feature is the same across the family, one color per row. That's the magic. You don't have to carry two strands across every stitch like tapestry or float like intarsia crochet. Instead, the pattern appears because tall stitches obscure earlier rows. Before we begin, though, if you've been enjoying this podcast, please subscribe and follow my socials. It helps others to find it. To understand Mosaic crochet, we actually have to talk about a knitter. In 1976, Barbara Walker published a landmark book called Mosaic Knitting. Before Walker, if you wanted complex color patterning, you typically reached for Fair Isle or intarsia as your color work method. They both ask you to manage multiple strands at once and carry them stranded or floated across the back of the work. Walker's insight was elegant. By using slip stitches, you can borrow color from previous rows and create vertical pops of design while only holding one strand of yarn in your hand. Mosaic Knitting, the book, focused on knowing knit and slip stitches and was considered an easier alternative to other color work techniques. That chart-friendly, grid-based logic became something crocheters could later translate into crochet's own language. And side note, Barbara Walker, who was quite an interesting individual, passed away at the age of 95 in December of 2025. So when people say Mosaic crochet is based on mosaic knitting principles, that's true. It's how the idea historically traveled. Crocheters looked at it and thought, we can do that too. Throughout the 1980s and 90s, designers experimented with ways to get similarly crisp geometry in crochet using long stitches and drop-down effects. But it wasn't until the late 1990s and early 2000s that pioneers, like the legendary Lily Chen, began to package Mosaic crochet as a teachable, repeatable method. As has been said before, crochet doesn't always get a single tidy invention date, because techniques often exist in classrooms, guilds, and private notebooks before they show up with a clean publication trail. But in terms of a clear, documented early champion in crochet publishing, one name comes up again and again: Lily Chen. By January 1999, Lily Chen had Mosaic Magic, Afghans Made Easy, published through Oxmoor House. That's a big deal. It means Mosaic Crochet wasn't just an experiment, it was presented as a complete, learnable system with projects makers could actually follow. And then comes the broadcast moment. In 2011, Interweave Crochet Me ran a piece on May 23rd describing Lily Chen, introducing her as the author to Mosaic Crochet and promoting Mosaic Crochet with Lily Chen through workshops and DVDs. That's the early 2010s craft media machine doing what it did best, taking a technique that exists in the ecosystem and putting it in front of a much wider audience. So, if you were crocheting in that era and suddenly saw mosaic everywhere, that interweave push is part of the why. Now, if you're a hook handler, you need to know that Mosaic Crochet isn't just one thing. It's a tale of two techniques, technical twins with different personalities, Inset Mosaic and Overlay Mosaic. Think of Inset Mosaic as the less messy version. You often work 2 rows in color A, then 2 rows in color B, turning your work as you go, working back and forth. When you want a motif to appear, you create a little window using chains in one color and skipped stitches from the other. Then you fill that window by crocheting over the chains down into the skipped stitch of the same color with a longer stitch, usually a double or treble. The pros? You usually don't have to cut your yarn every row, which is a big deal. Not gonna act like it's not. With Inset, you can often carry your yarns up the side. The feels? Lighter, often with better drape. The chains make your structure not quite as rigid, so it plays nicely with scarves, shawls, and wearables, but I can't understate the effect of yarn weight. Visually, Inset Mosaic can read a bit flatter, maybe more woven, depending upon the pattern, because it's not built on the same always right side construction as Overlay. Overlay Mosaic is what initially took the internet by storm. In Overlay, you work one color at a time on the right side of the fabric. Right-handers work from right to left, left-handers from left to right, often fastening off and joining new color at the edge. So you're always looking at the front side and not the back side. Technically, it's often built like this: back loop only single crochet for the background, and a drop down taller stitch, often described as a mosaic double or treble crochet, worked into the front loop of a lower row of the same color, and that creates the motif. The result? Thick, which explains why it was initially introduced with Afghans, but again, a lot depends upon the weight of the yarn. If you're using fingering or superfine, you can create wonderfully flowy fabric. It also has more structured texture, crisp lines, and yes, many more ends. So this is where a finishing detail matters. If you're crocheting flat, Overlay Mosaic creates a fringe of raw ends along the sides. The crochet envelope border is probably the most common way makers hide those ends cleanly. It's the classic seal-it-up solution. A border that essentially encloses the edge and tucks the evidence away, out of sight, out of mind. So why do they both exist? Because makers want options. Overlay, you get bold texture and maximum clarity. With Inset, slightly more fluidity, but many fewer ends. Here's where Mosaic Crochet goes from a technique you can learn to a movement. Enter Tinna Thórudóttir Thorvaldar, an Icelandic designer who has shared her time between Iceland and Havana, Cuba. On the pattern page of her Havana Afghan crochet-along, it states, "This is the first pattern I ever wrote using the Mosaic Crochet technique, back in 2015, published in Icelandic in 2016. The Havana cow was widely associated with 2018 as a crochet-along moment. The surrounding blog cow chatter repeats the origin story and the learning pathway. This is where the culture changes. Mosaic is chart-based, repeatable, and visually dramatic, perfect for tutorials and step-by-step videos. Crochet-alongs turn a technique into a shared experience. Row 12, friends, breathe, we've got this. Social platforms reward high-contrast geometry. Mosaic looks complicated, but it's teachable, so it spreads. Now here's a craft history detail from the Havana Cal ecosystem. The blog post notes Tinna first encountered the technique through the Apache Tears stitch. And I have to interject, I've never really been a fan of that stitch title. There is a stone, an obsidian called Apache Tears, which has a legend. In the 1870s, about 75 Apache warriors and the U.S. cavalry fought on a mountain overlooking what is now Superior, Arizona. Facing defeat, the outnumbered warriors rode their horses off the mountain to their deaths rather than be captured or killed. The wives and families of the warriors cried when they heard of the tragedy. Their tears turned into stones upon hitting the ground. But having grown up near the Jicarilla Apache Nation and Mescalero Apache tribe, I don't see anything like that in the stitch or the blanket pattern, so I don't know. But that's what it's called. Anyway, she started experimenting with the blanket until Havana emerged. And that's important because that's how fiber history often moves. Someone sees a technique, reverse engineers it, makes it their own, and suddenly thousands of people are crocheting it together across multiple time zones. She then released the Havana shawl and the terrazzo afghan, and understandably, people were obsessed. So let's end with the why it's still big today list. Number 1, high payoff, low juggling. One color per row feels manageable, even when the results look advanced. 2, chart-friendly design. Mosaic thinks in grids, which makes it easier to publish, share, and remix. If you can get your hands on some grafting paper, you can create your own mosaic motifs. And if you can manage Stitch Fiddle, which has an option to create overlay mosaic crochet charts, and will check them for you, even better. Number 3, it's perfect for modern learning. Video tutorials, plus cows, plus pattern communities supercharged adoption. 4, aesthetic timing. Geometric, tile, bold graphic trends pair beautifully with yarn. And 5, 2 technique paths. Overlay and inset let makers choose their own adventure. Texture-heavy drama, or smoother and fewer ends. So yes, Mosaic Crochet may be newer compared to crochet's early public record, but it's built the most crochet way possible, borrowing an idea, adapting it to the tool, and then letting community turn it into a global obsession. So grab your hook, pick 2 high contrast colors, and go make some history of your own. I'll leave a link for Tinna's YouTube channel where you can find tutorials as well as how to graft out your own motifs in the show notes. This has been Exploration Crochet. Don't forget to like, follow, and subscribe. And most importantly, thank you for listening.